Welcome to Old Stuff Show. Today we're looking at something very interesting. We're going to entitle it Vintage, Handy, and Inventive Collectibles. And basically I'm going to look at junk in a box. And they all have the theme of either handy in the past or inventive in the past, as people were in those days. I think if you look back to the society which compared to today, it was manual in terms of things they had to use, and if they didn't have it, they would invent it. So a lot of things come out of that that are kind of interesting. I've done shows, and I know one in particular, they have a table of 50 items there, and they ask each person to guess what the item is, and they're all from the past, and 75% of them people haven't a clue what they're all about. So this is one here that I picked out. It's kind of interesting, and it's a great example of the inventiveness of people in those days to meet a need. So it has a hole in one side. At the top it has holes, and it's just a cylinder that looks like it's been kind of homemade. So most people haven't a clue what this is, but it's something that's very practical. And if you think about the hole on the end, and if you were to put your kettle on the stove and put this on the end of the kettle, the steam would rise out here. And this was the perfect way for people in those days to steam their ribbons. And ribbons were something that everybody used in those days, and it was a handy way to press out these items, including also silk scarves. You could just steam that across, and the scarf would be all ship shape to go. So I like that sort of thing. You don't know what it is, and you guess, and then you realize, oh, that's very practical. Also, just the idea of so much baking that went on in those days, and people like women like to bake their pies, and so for a practical purpose here, this pie rack, which pies would be put on after they were baked, they'd be put on here to cool off, and they could do 4 at a time, and that was a handy way to have their kitchen baking all set to go. So another kind of inventive and handy little thing to think about. In those days too, people were sewers. Women and girls were sewers, and we don't today seem to have the young ladies or men be able to do crocheting or stitchery or what have you, and just plain sewing. This is a very old piece from the Victorian age, a little bigger than, than the normal pin cushion, but it's more than a pin cushion. I mean, the pins are in the middle here, and there's some very old ones, original to it, but you've got the little pegs on the side, and so here, of course, the thread could be stored, and these came in different sizes and then of course different colors. And then you'd have to have your thimble, which would be an accessory part of the sewing kit. And in those days, everything was sewn, clothes, repairs, you name it, and it was very well done. But this is very old. I think early 1900s, maybe even into the 19th century, Victorian. Some people collect thimbles, just, I know some people that collect all kinds of thimbles. They're always looking for something different. Some people I know collect these spools, and there's different sizes and those around as well. So great little find, and but it certainly represents the practical part of society in those days, and people had to be handy to make life easier for themselves. When you think back to those early days in the early 1900s, Eaton's catalog, this is a Sears robot catalog, in the old Eaton's catalogs, Timothy Eaton in Canada started his store in Toronto, and in the early 1900s it was a time of great immigration out to the Canadian West. The railway had been built, but there were no stores, and people wanted things like everybody else in the country, and so the catalog was invented, and Timothy Eaton put a catalog together of all his wares, and it could be shipped by rail, and it was a very handy and practical way of dealing with the necessities of life. And so I'm sure that it was a pretty exciting moment when the train arrived and they went down to the station and picked up their parcel that had been ordered in Eaton's catalog. So Eaton's catalogs, basically the catalogs last until the mid-70s. I think the last Eaton's catalog was 76, and but today, of course, online and even the standalone stores aren't doing too well. So catalogs were very handy. Of course, the old stories of people with the outhouse running out of toilet paper, and there was an Eaton's catalog there, and that became a handy accessory to the outhouse as well. And then connected with sewing, getting back to that for a moment, people really like to find these packages with needles. This particular one does have the needles on the back, and so needles in packages. The packages are kind of neat. This one here is a steeplechase needle book, and of course it's important that inside the needles still be there, and in this case it is. So the earlier ones, the very Victorian ones, are very nice. This one's called Lady Prim, and inside you've got a whole set of needles. But in those days it was handy, it was practical, and necessary to have as part of the kit. These two items in the box here are kind of neat. These are carders, carding for carding of wool. I've seen this demonstrated, and basically the wool is some wool pulled out, and then it's constantly pulled, and then it can be twisted and turned to wool and spun. But this was the initial process, and very important. Also, we go into the box here, and just some odds and ends here. Oh, I should just maybe show you this first. Didn't fit in the box. This is kind of neat. This is a very practical item from the early part of the century when central heating wasn't around. The fireplace was important. The stove was important. But it got pretty cold at night, so these bed warmers were a vital part of society and very handy in those days. So what they do is they put the embers, the coals in there, and before they went to bed, a half an hour or so, they would put this under the sheets and warm up the bed so that by the time you got there, it was nice and cozy and ready for you to go. And these are collectible too. There's all kinds of them out there. This is a relatively ornate one and in great shape, copperish. Again, in the old days, people like to be inventive in terms of practicality, and so we would find things like this little thing, if I can get it to work, little device, oh, there it is, where with a cup atop, it would become a cup. So it just extends out, put the lid on it, and you can use it for hiking or walking or camping, whatever your needs are. Practical because it goes down into small size, and handy because it's a great way to have something accessible to have a drink of water or whatever you want. And of course, while you're camping, also handy and important, things like jackknives. And there's a whole world of people out there who like to collect jackknives. I think when I was a youngster, everyone had one of these jackknives, and we used to play a little game with them. You'd open it and flip it, and there was some kind of a scoring system. But it was carried around with you because it was practical. Today's collector is looking for good shape, looking for interesting ones ones that are decorative. There's a decorative type one right there. And I think these can become quite a large collection in time. There's a lot of these out there, and they're all different. The Swiss Army knife, of course, is the big one for practicality. Has all the tools in one. This isn't a Swiss Army knife, but it does have a lot of features, and it's got an opener and a corkscrew, and just another, and a knife on the other side. Another practical thing to have and handy thing to have. In the old days, when milk was delivered to the door, the milk bottles with the rounded tops were the cream top milk bottles, and the cream rises to the top. That's where the expression comes from. And so the household, if they needed cream, they would have one of those bottles, and they would use this spoon here, this type of spoon. This is a Carnation spoon, and it would hang on the cream top bottle, and they could scoop the cream out that way, and it was a practical, handy device to have for the cream that was delivered to the door in that kind of bottle. And of course the tea drinkers, and some people may still do this, but the tea strainer, when people relied not on tea bags but on actual tea leaves, you wanted to keep the leaves out of the cup if you could, I suppose, and the strainer with the tea leaves in it, the water poured on it, would make your tea that way. So it was practical and handy at the same time. I might have already mentioned this in other shows, but the bottle openers, handy device to have with you, whether you're on the road or camping or what have you, because in those days there was not the twist turn bottle cap, so everybody had to have one of these, and it would be handy to have one of these in your car. If you were going somewhere, you could open your pop if you needed to transport it or what have you. And of course the finding your way raises another practical item in the arsenal of people's travels. If they're camping or what have you, the compasses. And I know all kinds of people who save compasses. They are collecting compasses. They have all different kinds of shapes and sizes. And this one's a very ornate one in a box. So that's a practical thing to have on hand at all times. And of course, when air conditioning wasn't around and people went to some gathering, maybe just went to church, it was pretty warm, and so another practical device, and it was simple as that, in a purse, and then it could be opened up and it could be used to fan yourself. This one's quite ornate. It's an ivory-like fan in pretty good condition, and people do collect fans as well. They're pretty hard sometimes though to get in good shape. This one is a silk one, and it's falling apart a little bit, but in the old days that would have been quite an ornate, elaborate, classy fan for people to use. Records of the 1950s, they had the 45 records with the big space in the middle. They had to have something to fill the gap, right? So things like this were the fillers for to be able to play the record. These were placed inside. Why they had to have the space, I'm not sure, but anyways, this was a device invented to be able to play the record of the time. Then a collectible, and its use is very variable. I mean, it's the ordinary bell, and I know all kinds of people also that collect bells. The bells were practical in the sense that they would call people to dinner or what have you. On the farm, the big bells, they would signal that lunch was ready, and so bell collecting is definitely one of the more interesting collectibles in today's world as well. So when you're out there and you're looking for things that are interesting and different, go no further than looking at, for example, kitchen devices, all kinds of strainers and pitters and mashers and and all that type of thing. They were all tools that were important in the kitchen at that time. They were handy, they were necessary, and they were used on a daily basis. And maybe not so much today as it used to be, but people used to decorate their kitchens in old kitchen accessories and utensils and that type of thing. But kind of interesting to think about how people lived in those days. When I interviewed people for my books, they constantly mentioned how hard it was, but they didn't realize it was hard at that time. But then looking back, they said life was not easy. We had to do everything by hand, and it took a long time to do all these things. But they did, they got through, and they responded to the needs of the time. Necessity's the mother of invention, and sometimes they invent these things to take care of their needs, like the steamer. A collectible looking for things that are handy and that are inventive can be one kind of neat direction you could go if you're collecting things. And these are some samples, just the tip of the iceberg, and just things that I just happen to have at this time. There's all kinds of other stuff out there, but you know, that's fun just to look at it and think about how they were used. I hope that you've learned something again today, and just remember that a new video comes up every Friday, and we're looking at all kinds of interesting collectibles, and you're learning a little bit at the same time, and hopefully enjoying it. Some of these go on eBay, and at the end of the program we now point out one way of getting to my ID number, LonRem, for those of you who don't know how to do that. So have a look at the stuff, and maybe there's something there that you'd like to add to your own collection. At this time, the flea market at Aberfoyle in Highway 6 South, going north off the 401 in Ontario, is open, and I am there every Sunday in the summer. So if you happen to be in that area and you want to go to the Aberfoyle Flea Market, it's about a mile north of the 401 on Highway 6 South. Come and see me. I'm in booth 383940. Say hello and tell me that you've heard about this on the video. So enjoy the rest of the summer, and thank you so much for watching, and happy collecting.